Joining us right now, senior national security correspondent for the Daily Beast, is Eli Lake. Good morning, Eli.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for joining us. So, I think that most Americans believe that in the Pentagon, there's a lot of people working in the Pentagon, and a lot of people working in those cubicles, working in those offices. They're all working on contingency plans for anything that might happen around the world. So when, the president seems to have gone from, in January calling ISIS a JV league to now recognizing that they're an enormous threat to the world, shouldn't there be a war plan available at his disposal to be able to strike against ISIS?
I don't think it's quite that simple. Josh and I wrote about the issue of sort of the war plan that Obama was wanting, but this is not really on the Pentagon. This is about convincing President Obama of really basic questions, such as, are you at war with the aim of destroying ISIS, or are you at war, as he kind of already is, to protect facilities and personnel in Iraq, to protect vulnerable minorities in Iraq, to protect critical infrastructure, such as the Mosul Dam in Iraq? So you can start to see how that's really a policy decision. It's not about, my reporting now is that they have lists of targets of places in both Iraq and Syria that are affiliated with ISIS and individuals that they want to hit. The problem is a lot of the ISIS leaders will move around a lot, knowing that they will eventually kind of become marked men, as they are now, I think. But the real issue is, what does Obama want to do? But Obama calls ISIS a cancer, and he says that justice will be done, which is a very Bushy and Cheney-esque phrase. Well, the natural implication is that it's like the war on terror. It's like, we were at war with Al-Qaeda. There was no ceasefire with Al-Qaeda. There was no, we'll hit Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, but we won't go after them in Pakistan. Indeed, there was a policy like that for a while. Obama ran against that, critically of that, in 2007 and 2008. And then as Bush before him, right at the end, and then really Obama expanded it, they went after Al-Qaeda in Pakistan and then later in Yemen and all over the map. So now ISIS is, has its roots in Al-Qaeda, but is now fighting with Al-Qaeda in addition to everybody else.
Eli,
so the question is it going to be like, wipe out ISIS, or is it going to be, only hit them here and here?
are you getting the sense, Eli, that, at least I am, that there's a lot of indecision on the part of the president, and you hear that through things that his staff has said. The Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Martin Dempsey first came out saying that there would be airstrikes. Then he had to walk it back and said, well, first we're going to do these drone surveillance missions first, which sounds to me like they're just going to scope out the targets and then bomb later. But we don't know if they're going to bomb later. Is this just indecision, or is the president trying to just show that he's being careful and he's thinking this through before making a big decision?
No, I think the president really hasn't decided. But I think that the problem is that Secretary Kerry, Secretary Hagel, to a certain extent, General Dempsey, although Dempsey is kind of, he's walked back. But when the real tell here was when they said with an imminent threat to the homeland, we've never seen anything like these guys. Kerry called them the face of evil and said that, they will continue to challenge them wherever they raise their ugly head. That is the language and rhetoric of, war on terror. This is, the war aim should then be, let's wipe out ISIS wherever they are. Because remember, ISIS also seems to be attacking in Lebanon now, too. They really are metastasizing. It is now a 5-alarm fire.
And we haven't made up our mind. So how soon does the president have to, in your estimation, make up his mind and decide whether we're going to take serious action?
Well, he's going to decide by the end of the week, and I think at the low end of that prospect will be some airstrikes in Syria. The question is, to what end? Is this going to be part of a strategy to rid the world of ISIS? Is he going to get up and he's going to give a speech that says, listen, we cannot allow this group, and really it's not just this group, it's the ideology of fanatic jihadism, because it doesn't really matter if they're getting directions from Ayman al-Zawahiri in Al-Qaeda Central, or whether they've created a rival to Ayman al-Zawahiri in Al-Qaeda Central. What matters is that both of those guys want to establish a caliphate and will do so by extraordinary, awful, public, and terrifying violence. So, that's the relevant game plan in a lot
Yeah.
of ways. So, but is he going to do that and sort of say, all right, like I've dithered too much on this, and now we're serious, and we want to lead this coalition against them? And it certainly appeared last week and early this week that he was. And then you watch, Josh Earnest at the podium yesterday, and you get the impression that Obama's still receiving information and monitoring the situation. And, maybe he's like getting second thoughts and cold feet and wants to try to figure out a way that he can get out of this with the minimum amount of effort possible.
And,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And Eli, depending on what decision the president makes, the next step then will be, well, does he need Congress's authorization to carry out whatever decision that is? You see a lot of politicians on both sides of the aisle suggesting that he does need to get permission. But what's your take on this? Because my understanding of the authorization for use of military force against terrorists that was passed 3 days after 9/11 gave the president, as commander-in-chief, regardless of who the president is, quite a bit of leeway to act against a group like this if it is to prevent an attack against America.
No. That resolution, the authorization for the use of military force, what I like to call sometimes the 914 resolution,
Yeah.
that resolution only said you have the authority to use international military force or whatever you need to do anywhere in the world where you can find al-Qaeda and associated forces or the people responsible for 9/11. Now, the people responsible for 9/11 are long taken care of. The AUMF, or the 914 resolution, has been used by Obama himself to justify attacks against the Taliban, al-Qaeda's franchises in Somalia and Yemen. The problem with ISIS is that they're also at war now with al-Qaeda. They're attacking its franchise in Syria, and they are publicly insulting Zawahiri, and they have denounced their oath of bayat, or their fealty to the organization. So you can't call them an associated force, which is why a lot of people think you might need to have a new resolution, or maybe if you just limited it to Iraq, you could use the one that was in 2002, though that there's problems with that because that's about specifically Saddam Hussein and his military. So I think that's the argument for why you need a new resolution.
Interesting. Well, and given the fact that this is an election year,
Congress doesn't want this, though. It's a hot potato that I think they don't want thrown their way. So you have that element as well. The president may know that, right? And just trying to keep it out of the hands of Congress right now. Democrats.
You disagree,
don't want
Eli?
it.
Yeah, I think actually at this point, the Republicans have a really powerful talking point if Obama does nothing, which there is a distinct possibility he will do very little or not enough. And that is, as Christians and Yazidis and Turkmen were slaughtered in the center and the heart of the Middle East, the most volatile, part of the world, Obama did golf. He did nothing.
Yeah.
And that's such a tempting political talking point. Also, the video and the actions of ISIS, I think, have changed the United States and changed Americans than they were, against the red line on chemical weapons. Everybody agrees Bashar Assad, nobody could possibly like what Christopher Hitchens used to call him, the human toothbrush. But on the other hand, I don't think that that's a menacing problem in terms of, Americans are not safe because of this guy.
Yeah.
You look at that video and the beheading of James Foley, and you say, they're coming for us.
People are right back where they were after 9/11, or at least closer than we have been. Eli Lake, Senior National Security Correspondent at the Daily Beast. Thanks for joining us, sir.